some feminist analytical tools that can start to help us all with our work. And I really wanted to add the little caveat that this is just an introduction. And so we have to explore more, as the months go on. We have art making the case for these really complex, but also quite simple, foundational principles, which is how can we expect people to access all of their human rights if they're not embodied? So in DIVA, from the very beginnings, what we've said is we are going to ascribe to that no matter what set of work we're working on, it has to be around how does that look like in an individual body? Because we all have such different bodies, right? Whether it's our age, whether it's our health status, whether it's the kind of work we do, if we're outside all the time or inside all the time, whether it is our sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, whether it is our biology and the body in which we're born. All of these things are really, really important. And then you add on things like sexual and reproductive health and rights, or what we call SRHR, the ability to make these decisions over your sexuality and to do that in a healthy and an empowering kind of way. What I find really interesting is these are often the sets of work that governments find the most difficult. And if you think about it, there's a reason for that, right? Because what we are asserting is that this body in which I hold all of my human rights, in which I go out every day into the world and interact with each other, this is the body in which I experience both the pleasure that I have in my life, but also the most pain and fear and anger. So we've got to really do this work on sexual and reproductive health and rights and integrate it into all our feminist work. I don't care if we're working on economics or we're working on education, all of these things are important. You just look at the link, for instance, I just give a concrete example. If you are a teacher in a school and you are not comfortable working on issues of sexual and reproductive health and rights, how are you going to do the work around bullying, whatever kind of bullying it is? How are you going to do the work around masculinities and feminisms? How are you going to do all of that work? So very, very important. Then the second tool that we wanted to kind of gift you is what is intersectional feminism? So one of the wonderful things, and I've put, the woman who first started doing this work and in her body of academic work is this wonderful African-American feminist called Kimberly Crenshaw. And in the 1980s, she says herself that it has been over a century of people making this claim that if it's all just about, say, white women, or white people, then we're not putting into place all of those other realities that are part of all of our lives, whatever our color is around the world. And so intersectional feminism, it's not just about naming your identities. So I can say everybody in this Zoom meeting, right, all 71 of us, we all have so many different identities, true? So I might be let's just take me. I might be a 53-year-old. I am a woman. I'm a cis woman. So I live in Nandera. I live in Fiji. My mother is Australian. My father's passed on, but he's from Dravwalu in Kandavu. I grew up here, but then I went away. There are all kinds of things that make me who I am, so that at 53 years old, I have a really intersectional identity. Now, the naming is not the intersectionality. What it is about all of the linkages that give me either more or less power in my life. And we'll go on into that in a moment in the next slides. Because that interplay of power, if you're living, for instance, in Ngao, your life is not the same as an indigenous woman who is living in Suva. It's a very different life. So even though we might say we are indigenous women together, you might say that, but your life actually plays out in very different ways. That is what we call intersectional feminism, is that we don't want to just say all women are this, all men are this, all gender non-binary people are this. We want to take it apart and to look at all the beautiful complex components of our lives. It's really simple. And to those who say, oh, intersectionality, it's a long word, I don't want to work on it. It's the same in anything in life. You learn what it is that that word means, and then you work out how you can use it in your own life. You might have another word. You might use a sentence to describe it. You don't have to use the word intersectionality. But what you do is make sure that we're not just putting everybody into the one big basket, because it becomes another hegemony, what we call a hegemony. Everybody is the same. No, we're not. Okay, and then the next slide really takes it a little bit further and breaks down intersectionality. So it gives you just that little top line from Kimberly Crenshaw that says, intersectionality is the lens through which you see power, how it collides, where it locks, where it intersects. And it's the acknowledgement that everybody has their unique experiences of both privilege and of discrimination. So the next slide then helps us to take it even further, because we're talking about what's called the coin model. This coin model is really interesting and useful, and I found it's one of the most useful tools for people in understanding how we all create those experiences of privilege and inequality with each other. So let's just, there's some added, everything here has some references. You can just click on them. This amazing thing of the internet means that you can go to where these stories and these ideas come from. So this one, any system of inequality, right? So whether it's sexism or racism or ableism, you know, the way that we treat people with disabilities, all these things that we do, they're a coin. You can think of them as a coin. And the coin has two sides, right? Any coin has two sides. So everyone has both the privilege and the oppression. So the top of the coin, the privilege, what is privilege? Privilege very simply is that advantage that you have because of who you are when you're born. You didn't earn it. You have it because of who you happen to be. And then the bottom of the coin is the disadvantage that you didn't earn, but it's because of who you happen to be. So that's at a very kind of basic level, and then we break it down even more. This coin model figure 2 really helps us to understand the differences in terms of what we call intersectional privilege and intersectional oppression. So if you look at the top, again, we have upper middle class. So the way that we put people into categories because of what they earn, the amount of money they earn, whether or not they might have a home that they own. There's all kinds of ways we put people into categories, whether or not they're Caucasian or white. And there is a real system of white oppression, but there is also settler and indigenous differences, right? And here in Fiji and many other places around the world, there is that set of discomforts that we often talk about or don't talk about or do in very weird ways because we're not sure how to do that discomfort together. And then able-bodied and people with disabilities and the way that we talk to each other, whether you're straight or non-straight, whether you're cis, whether you're, and we'll talk about cis in a little while, whether you're male or female, whether you identify as woman or man, all of these different kinds of privileges. Then you look at the bottom, you can see the same thing, non-white or racialized classes, whether we call someone lower class, maybe they don't speak English in the way we think they should, even though English is an imposed language, right? So these are all the kinds of questions about power and privilege that we need to ask ourselves. Then the next kind of tool that you can have in your toolkit and take away is what's called an interlinkage analysis. So not the same as intersectionality, interlinkage. And basically what it does is say there are at least 4 lenses that you could look through. There's many others, right? But 4 that are really helpful. You can take any subject. So whether it's smoking, cigarettes, whether it's like, I don't know, marijuana, whether it's, what's another thing? Abortion, there's any issue that you want to take in the world, anything. And you can do an analysis, violence against women and girls, any issue you want, and you can look at 4 lenses. So for instance, one of them is about bodies. Any issue, doesn't matter what it is, religion, anything else. It is about bodies, how the different bodies experience that situation. Everything is about power and money. So we call it political economy. Anything is about where money moves, where resources move, who owns the resources, who are the ones who get decisions. I can tell you, not everyone has the possibility to get into the Prime Minister's office, right? but some people do. So those ones have more power, they're at the top of the coin, and certain others aren't. Then the third one is political restructuring and social transformation. And that is about our human relationships. How many of us are able to be in households that welcome all kinds of genders, that welcome all kinds of bodies into the household, and who doesn't? And then the last one, which is political ecology. So political ecology is about climate change. It is about whether or not we're taking care of other species. I don't know if you know, but every day 200 species go extinct around the world. That's 1,000 times the rate of extinction that we had pre-industrial era. So what we're doing is actively, through human intervention, killing off other species. So these issues, these 4 different lenses, you can use in terms of any set of issues as analysis. Okay. Then the next one, really, one of the things that we're interested in thinking and talking about is, if we're uncomfortable around issues of women, don't just look to women as the solution either. So a lot of people, is it all right? Or something wrong with it's okay? All right. I'm getting little signals in the background, so I'm trying to work out if there's something wrong with the sound. So one of these problems that happens is that these forms of decolonization have to come together, because the colonization is all together as well. Right? So basically, if you have women who are treated in a certain way through the colonial process, then you will have certain kinds of movements that exist now because of what women went through. So here in the Pacific, for instance, we had our independence movements around the 1960s, the 1970s, right? That was when a lot of the independence movements went through. But if you talk to someone on our call like Rosa and others, they will tell you that for them, they are still living in a colonized environment. So if you're in West Papua, if you're a Kanak person, if you're in New Caledonia, then the experiences of colonization are not something that are in the past, they are with us now. And a lot of us would argue that colonization still is with us, but it's with us in a different form, right? So there's no post-colonization, that there are what we call coloniality practices that are still part of our bodies, our institutions, the environment, all of that today. Okay, and then that's why we find ourselves where we are today. If you look at these charts, they will tell you where we are in terms of environment and the natural world, right? So one of the things that we know is nothing is working. And nothing is working because we are trying to practice reform, but it's like a human behavior. You don't want to give up something that you've had for a long period of time. So nobody wants to give up the fossil fuel economy, and yet we know we have to. So one of the battles that's being fought right now at the climate change conferences is this idea that we can't trade carbon. Because what happens when you trade carbon is someone might get some money for it over here in the south, but the north is still polluting. They're still putting carbon emissions into the air. So carbon trading is not the same as bringing down the carbon emissions. And that's a classic example of trying to solve a problem by not solving the problem, by just moving the problem. Another form that we can talk about is what we call extraterritorial behavior of companies. So governments might say, okay, a Canadian government might have a mining company that's working somewhere in the Pacific or somewhere across the world, but they don't want to take responsibility for what their company that they're helping to fund. They put a flag on that company, but that company is operating in another country and they're doing damage, whether it's to the people there, whether it's to the land there, whether it's to the oceans there. So we have to talk about the behavior of states, the behavior of companies, and the behavior of societies within our own community, but also be clear on what's happening in the rest of the world. And climate change, one of the biggest sets of learnings that is a set of feminist and left-wing learning is climate change is just a symptom of deeper issues. If you look at this map, you can see what the problem is. We have 90% of coral reefs that are under threat right now. We have 70% of rainforests that are already gone. 200 species a day that are becoming extinct. We have oxygen depletion within the ocean. We have a change in ocean currents. There are all kinds of things that are happening around the world. That doesn't happen and we just say, okay, we're going to work together on, reducing plastics and everything will be okay. How will we reduce the plastics? Plastics is also based on a fossil fuel-based economy. How are we going to stop the fossil fuel economy? Are we still giving money to the fossil fuel economy at the same time as we're saying we don't like fossil fuels? So we're making some really unhealthy choices and then we're going, but this map, this is what is wrong with the world. Yes, it is, but what are we going to do at a systems change level in order to shift it? Because the window for us to be able to change it is really short. And that's what this next section is really just saying is, what we're trying to say is that no matter what you want to say about ownership and about who is in charge and about elites and everything else around the world, the reality is humans and as other living species, we can't live without water. We can't live without clean air. We can't live without a healthy biodiversity in the soil. None of these things are possible for a life to sustain itself. So we say the commons is all our planetary need. This is something that all of us require in order to have a healthy ecosphere. So if we're going to be part of the change, then let's work out where we have to place our energy. And the next one I wanted to say, I hope I've got the slide because it's a really important slide. I might have taken it out. Oops. Okay, I think it comes later. But maybe I'll just end by saying in this section, be careful where we place our energy, right? Because it's very easy to get caught in these big sets of organizing around a particular issue. Okay, everybody work on making sure that you cut down on use of the use of your car. Or everybody do the work on cutting down on, what's another one? On eating meat. Or everybody reduce the pollution from plastics. The reality is it's an and need. All of these things are necessary because it's about systems change. So one set of work isn't going to do the level of change that we require, right? And that's why we're interested in building movements for change. The next tool that we're going on to, I hope you're all okay still. It's a lot to take in, but as I said, this is a little taste test. Think of it like those little, I don't know, in a restaurant you get these little testing plates. So these are all little testing plates and you'll go on and do your work later. But in terms of praxis, one of the really important things about the praxis idea is about action and reflection cycles. And one of the things, the reason why feminists love this idea is because it's a little bit revolutionary. Because what it says is you don't have to go on you don't have to learn something and then you get it right. What you do is you keep acting and reflecting. And that means that what it does also is it dismantles the idea that only certain experts have the knowledge. So it allows us to pull from lots of different sets of knowledge through all of our ecosystems and the ecosphere that we're in, right? Through all our society. It says, don't just look to the universities. Often they're the ones who, because of whatever reason, because of careerism or because of geopolitics in the region, they might not be looking at the right solutions. It might come from somewhere else. Often it does come from somewhere else in the system. So let's be clear that praxis cycles are really, really important in the way that we do our work. And also it's very empowering. If you make a mistake, Diva's been very, very focused on this because what we said from 2011 was, we don't care, we're not going to recruit from consultants or anyone from outside, we're going to build the bodies of knowledge from inside our network and our collectives, and that's what we've been trying to do from the beginnings. And one of the points I wanted to make is being honest about that. That's not easy though to do, right? Because we have all our different strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes it's painful when you find out that you don't have the knowledge within your organizing environment, and sometimes you have to find it from somewhere else. So one concrete example today is where none of us are good on the technical aspect. So we have our friends from, what's the name of this company? Only Idea. Who are helping us with this particular set of work because we have to go to the experts in that area. But it means that we can keep concentrating and have more time on the things that we are experts in, as long as the body of politics remains the same inside, that we're interested in the same values and principles that we're putting forward into the work. That continues no matter how long we're doing our work.